Hi students, in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about how American society changes in the 1920s. The decade from 1919 to 1921 is one of the most dynamic in American history. It's one of the decades that sees the greatest change, a rise in urbanization, a rise in prosperity, and then really a tug of war between rebellions against convention and efforts to return to the standards and norms of previous eras. And so we begin with the census in 1920. Census in 1920 returned results that there were about 100 million Americans. Half of them were under 25, so this is a growing population. Life expectancy was in the mid-50s. Whites and Latinos made up about 90% of this population. A further 9% was African American, and then the remainder were Native Americans and other races. More than half of the population now lived in cities with populations of 2,500 or more, which isn't huge, but it's a change from the individual, independent, farm-based society that we've seen in most of American history up until this point. Even more interestingly, in some ways, about 16% live in the 10 biggest cities. So there's a growing urbanization, there's a growing concentration of the American population. One of the big driving changes, or one of the big forces driving change in American society during this period, is mass production. That thanks to the Second Industrial Revolution, we see that American industries are able to produce goods faster and more efficiently than ever before. And the experiences of World War I have only made this process more efficient. And so now, through technological innovations and greater efficiencies in industry, there are new appliances like washing machines, refrigerators that are available for Americans to purchase than there have been before. And at the same time, Americans, after having spent 5 years or 3 or 4 years or so being told to be financially responsible during the years of the war, are now being told to spend freely, are being told to spend on credit. And so we start to see the rise of a consumer-based society, a society that is focused more on the part of the population that is buying goods, stuff, rather than a focus on the society that's producing it. So this is becoming a consumer society that's buying a lot of products because products are being produced more efficiently, more cheaply than they have been before. A couple of other ways in which we see this society changing is through transport. Flight was something that had been developed by the Wright brothers in the early 20th century, but planes remained kind of a rich person's hobby until World War I, when planes were used in combat for the first time. And from this point onwards, the US government is willing to provide federal support to subsidize the growth of the aircraft industry and the development of airports and an infrastructure that will enable travel by aeroplane. We also have early American pilot heroes like Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart. So air transportation is another way in which we see mass production, more planes being produced than ever before, and we see the society being bound together more closely than ever before. Another invention, another innovation in terms of transport during this period that further binds American society together is the development of the car, the development of a car-centered society. In 1908, there are only 8 million automobiles in the United States. By the time we get to 1929, that number has doubled. And that's in large part due to the process that's developed by Henry Ford and the Ford Company. He focuses on developing a factory production line that can produce cars remarkably quickly. Each car is taking 90 minutes to produce. Each one is being rolled off the line basically 1 minute after the other. And he's also able to sell them very cheaply. So these were cars that were new cars that were available for $4,000 each, and that's in modern day terms. So they were way cheaper in terms of dollars back in the 1920s. So this is becoming a very efficient industry. It's becoming easier and easier for people to buy cars, even easier actually than it is today. And this was an industry that was really important to the growth of American wealth. It was subsidized by the discovery of huge reserves of oil in Texas, Wyoming, in California, that would enable fuel for automobiles to be very cheap. It fuels this huge industry where by the time we get to 1930, about 10% of the population now work in the automobile industry, and then even more of the population work in industries that are linked to the automobile industry, such as producing roads. And the development of the automobile, the development of a car-centered society, is seen as a way of promoting American freedom. It's seen as a way of making Americans more free to live where they want and travel where they want. And so there's this theme of freedom that's running through this consumer society that's developing. Americans have the freedom to buy what they want. They also have the freedom to travel wherever they want. And that's kind of coming together, but at the same time, paradoxically and fascinatingly, Americans are experiencing more of the same culture than ever before. And that's what I'll talk about in the next video.